How the House Select Committee duped medical illustrator Ida Dox into falsifying wounds on JFK. Ida Dox has much to be proud of as an author and illustrator for the world's best medical journals and teaching textbooks, as shown at right. Medical illustrations by Ida Dox are so rich in detail and realism, she was asked to serve her government as the medical illustrator for the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the late 1970s. Her assignment seemed noble and important: provide accurate yet more tasteful illustrations of the bullet wounds inflicted on President Kennedy on November 22, 1963. Her drawings would allow the House Select Committee to avoid publishing the vastly more gruesome autopsy photos. And her artwork would be the illustrative proof presented in the House Select Committee report used to present its main conclusion that Lee Harvey Oswald at Wright fired all the shots at JFK from above and behind the limousine. It should have been a task that became a proud part of her professional legacy as one of the world's most renowned medical illustrators. But after her work was complete, it would become clear that Ida Dox was duped into misrepresenting the wounds on JFK by the House Select Committee. Instead of speaking publicly and proudly about her contribution to the historical record of the JFK assassination, Ida Dox went into stealth mode and has never openly spoken about her controversial JFK schematic drawings. Medical illustrator Harold Rydberg says he was duped nearly 15 years earlier by the Warren Commission into falsifying JFK bullet wounds to incriminate Oswald as the lone assassin. He spent the rest of his life trying to right this historical wrong. Rydberg, who was never allowed to view the official JFK autopsy photos to replicate his 3 drawings below, went to his grave believing that the wounds he depicted are misleadingly inaccurate. So how is it that Ida Dox could be duped into misrepresenting the wounds on JFK by the House Select Committee some 15 years after Harold Rydberg was duped into doing the same thing for the Warren Commission? Dr. Cyril Weck, one of the House Select Committee forensics panel members, confirms that both Rydberg and Dox were denied access to the original autopsy photos that they were being asked to replicate in illustrative form. Harold Rydberg drafted these 3 diagrams 4 months after the autopsy, based on the verbal descriptions of the wounds by Bethesda Naval Hospital surgeon James J. Humes. Ida Dox drew her illustrations based on suspect autopsy photos, as you will see, given to her by Dr. Michael Baden at Wright, chairman of the House Select Committee Forensics Panel of Medical Experts. As Baden's colleague Dr. Cyril Weck pointed out to me from my second book, JFK Case Not Closed, the autopsy photos given to Dr. Baden by the House Committee were forgeries. Dr. Weck was the only forensics panel member who had examined the original autopsy photos and x-rays in the National Archives, but he could not convince his fellow panelists that the photos they were reviewing were doctored. One immediate consequence was that Dr. Baden had Ida Dox craft her illustrations, such as the one at left, based on what the doctored photos showed. 2 other Dox illustrations below, like Rydberg's, show bullet entry wounds from the shots coming from above and behind, where both government panels say lone assassin Oswald was positioned. These similar drawings by Rydberg at left and Dox at right were key exhibits presented in their committees in finding that Lee Oswald was the gunman who fired the kill shot. So could all members of the House Select Committee Forensics Panel except Dr. Weck have been tricked by forged medical images? The answer is yes, especially when it becomes obvious that the House Select Committee withheld other key medical evidence from its own forensics panel that would have exposed the autopsy photos as forgeries. As this Dox drawing shows, which exactly matches the autopsy photo provided to Dr. Bodden's panel, you can see that the back of the president's head is fully intact. This Dox black and white version shows only a small bullet entry wound at the crown or cowlick area of the skull to the right of the ruler near the top. So right here we have the bullet entry wound in the cowlick area of the president's head. This would prove to be a problem. The color Dox diagram shows the bullet entry at the cowlick area of the skull and a corresponding blowout exit wound above the right ear, indicating a shot from the rear. As Dr. Cyril Weck, Dr. David Mantik at Wright, and other medical experts who have studied the autopsy materials in the National Archives all report, the Ida Dox illustrations, which Dr. Bodden says perfectly reflect the location of the wounds on the autopsy photos given to him by the House Select Committee, do not match the original X-rays of the president's shattered skull in the National Archives. According to these qualified experts, the X-rays clearly show blasted away skull bone at the right rear of Kennedy's skull, which is clearly depicted in this unofficial illustration. Yet this Dox diagram, which is what Dr. Bodden says he saw on the autopsy photo provided to the forensics panel, shows the back of President Kennedy's head to be fully intact. Either the autopsy X-ray or the autopsy photo can be correct, but not both. So which is it? Even as forensics panel was convening, it was not aware of evidence in the House Select Committee's possession that the president's fatal head wound was not as depicted in the autopsy photo it was provided, or as replicated in the Dox diagram. Compare this more recent head wound drawing based on dozens of medical expert witnesses to the Dox diagram at Wright. Again, only one of these images can be correct. So which diagram correctly shows the lethal head wound sustained by President Kennedy? Another medical expert who reviewed the autopsy materials in the National Archives is Dr. Gary Aguilar. He was stunned to learn of vital evidence both the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee withheld from the public in their final reports. According to documents Dr. Aguilar discovered in the files of the Assassination Records Review Board inquiry in the mid-1990s, both the Warren Commission and House Select Committee on Assassinations suppressed the vital eyewitness testimony of multiple medical experts. These expert medical witnesses validate the damage seen in the X-ray and reveal the autopsy photo given to the forensics panel, and by default the Dox diagram at Wright, to be a forgery. In fact, the head X-ray in the National Archive shows damage to the right rear of JFK's skull, per the diagram at left, not the Dox drawing at right that depicts the back of the head to be fully intact. We now know that the Warren Commission disregarded the testimony of as many as 20 Parkland Hospital doctors, nurses, and trauma room attendants, all of whom described seeing a massive blowout exit wound at the back of JFK's head as depicted here. Two examples are Dr. Robert McClelland at left and Dr. Charles Crenshaw at right, both demonstrating where they observed a fist-sized exit wound on JFK while trying to save his life. For my book, JFK Case Not Closed, I asked X-ray expert Dr. David Mantik this question about the deadly JFK head wound. Do the autopsy X-rays you saw in the National Archives support or refute the observations of several Parkland medical professionals who said they saw what appeared to be the exit wound on the president's head, located at the right rear occipital region of his skull, as indicated by Dr. Robert McClelland in his photo? Here is Dr. Mantik's stunning answer to Dr. McClelland's history-challenging observation. The X-rays are in excellent agreement with the eyewitnesses, including Dr. McClelland. The photographs of the back of the head show no occipital wound. Of course, they can only show scalp, and therefore they can tell us nothing about the underlying bone, which McClelland said was missing. The official X-rays agree with McClelland. Only a few Parkland medical professionals were called to testify before the Warren Commission. The wound they observed, as represented below, was ignored by the Commission and was completely omitted in its 888-page Warren report. Even more stunning, Dr. Gary Aguilar discovered that the House Select Committee on Assassinations, some 15 years later, also suppressed the Parkland medical staff head wound observations in its final report, and it also omitted the reported observations of the fatal exit head wound by 26 additional medical professionals who viewed the president's body at the time of autopsy. All 26 medical personnel at the Bethesda Naval Hospital stated that they observed a gaping exit wound at the lower right rear section of President Kennedy's head. In total, there are 46 medical professionals from two locations at two different times on November 22, 1963, all of whom stated they saw a sizable exit wound at the right rear occipital region of JFK's head. Both government inquiries kept this vital information from the American people for nefarious reasons. But the House Select Committee took its cover-up one sinister step further. It brought in professional people like Ida Dox and the forensics panel to project a credible undertaking. Then the House Select Committee sabotaged the work of these people by suppressing evidence from them or giving them falsified evidence to work with. This became apparent years later when Doctors Aguilar, Bodden, and Weck were speakers at a conference in Washington, D.C. As Dr. Aguilar noted from my book, JFK Case Not Closed, I showed Dr. Bodden and Dr. Weck slides of the actual statements and diagrams that the autopsy witnesses had given the HSCA and which the HSCA had suppressed in 1979. I then asked Bodden and Weck if they'd ever seen these testimonies, statements, and diagrams that had forensic significance. Neither of them had. Dr. Michael Bodden had no reason to believe that the autopsy photos he was given by the House Select Committee were not authentic. Therefore, he could not have known that the images he provided to Ida Dox to craft her medical illustrations were also not accurate. Ida Dox could not have known that she would be duped into drawing false representations of the wounds on President Kennedy, nor the reasons why. Ida Dox, Harold Rydberg, and so many others have been wrongly believed to have been part of a JFK assassination cover-up. In reality, Ida Dox and Harold Rydberg were nothing more than unknowing pawns in a JFK assassination cover up by government inquiries.